For the sake of my children, is a narrative of a love story of a Christian Australian girl who fell in love with a Saudi Muslim man. Then the Western sweetheart converted to Islam and married her handsome Arab lover. Traveled with him to the Islamic world and spent 10 years in the said world. After that, she returned to the Western world with six out of her nine children and wrote her tragic life story in the Muslim world in a book entitled Irshad and the Abuse of Muslim Women. This love story was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored on the retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs in a review to be printed in a newspaper, general journal, or school magazine. All characters in this book are fictitious, and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 16: The Village Chief and the Beautiful White Woman. The village chief is a notorious womanizer who suffers from a sexual obsession. His name is Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed. His ideal in life is the Prophet Muhammad. Every young woman he saw her and lusted after her beauty or a sexy body, he made her his wife. Every year he divorces his four wives and marries another set of four virgin girls. No family can refuse his engagement for their daughters' marriage. He is like Al-Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was addicted to marrying. Al-Hassan used to divorce four wives and marry four virgin girls in their place at once. Even in a few cases, the village chief forced married men to divorce their beautiful wives, marry them, and rape them in a halal manner. He justified his vicious demands by referring to the example of the beautiful wife Zainab bint Jahsh and her husband Zayd ibn al-Rasul, the adoptive son of the Prophet Muhammad. The Messenger of God divorced her from him with a verse of the Quran, and he married her, and her marriage to the Prophet was conducted by Allah Himself, and the angel Gabriel was the sole witness. The arrival of the beautiful white woman, Irshad, in that village made the chief Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad conclude that she would be his new bride. First of all, he had never actually seen a blonde foreign woman in his entire life. He only saw white women in newspapers and magazines. On that day, Irshad broke all the rules and restrictions of the Islamic law when she came with this angry pilgrim woman with her while her clothes were torn. During her struggle with her two captors, her Islamic burqa was cut into pieces and her other undergarments were also torn. Therefore, most of her sexy white body was exposed while she was half naked. Chief Sheikh Ahmad is the first to express his admiration for the new foreign woman's beauty. He took a deep breath and let it out by saying Subhanallah or Hallelujah. The Australian widow appeared to the leader not only as a beautiful human female, but as an immortal virgin from paradise, about whom he had read in his sacred religious texts, the Holy Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. This is how he saw her. She has big buttocks and high spear-like breasts. Her color is like white milk. Her neck is like a bottle of ghee. Her cheeks are like apples, and her lips are like pineapples. Her long blonde hair is like a ponytail. Her nose is like the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. Her eyes like the eyes of the beautiful Arab Layla, who made Qais madman after her love. and her beauty is like an Indian movie superstar heroine. So once he saw the beautiful and sexy white woman, he decided to add her to his harem list of beautiful virgins. That night, Chief Muhammad Ahmed orders the white woman Irshad to stay in his house and under his hospitality until the village elders make their decision on her case. She has no choice but to accept his invitation. During dinner, the head of the village asked Irshad to tell him about her past life and how she fell into the hands of these two men who kidnapped her from the city and brought her to his village and imprisoned her inside the shrine of the holy mountain. The white woman became honest with him and told him briefly about her life in the Mujahideen camps in Kandahar city and why she left the place after her valiant Saudi husband was martyred in his jihad war against the American infidels in New York City. The notorious womanizer, the village chief, becomes overjoyed when he hears that the beautiful white woman has lost her Arab husband and is currently living as a single mother with her 7 children. He decides to marry her and bring her children to live with her in his village. He became very hilarious when he found out she has under 8 daughters. The dirty old man sort of raping her white female children too. And so, after the lovely and sexy white widow enjoyed the delicious meal that was especially prepared on her honor, the head of the village, Sheikh Ahmed, revealed to her what was in his heart. The Australian white woman Irshad is shocked when the old man proposed to marry her in front of his wife. Very politely, she rejected his engagement and thanked him for offering to help her raise her 7 children. The Australian woman innocently believed that the village chief was like a Western man and that the woman could easily reject his engagement and get away with the consequences of her rejection. His ugly expression on his face annoyed and horrified her, revealing his anger at her refusal of his proposal. Irshad understood that his heart was wounded, his pride shattered, and he felt deeply humiliated before his wife, children, and servants. He felt as if the white, foreign, Christian, infidel woman had spit on his bearded face when she refused to accept his engagement to marry her. No girl or a family ever refused his proposal to marry one of their daughters, whatever her age or whatever her beauty. After dinner, the pretty, blonde, white woman was escorted by some of the chief's women, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad, to a small hut that had been prepared for her accommodation in the village. And because she was overcome with fatigue, exhaustion, and sleepiness, due to the lack of sleep and rest in the last night she spent locked up alone inside the shrine. The Australian woman slept like a tree trunk. She hasn't slept so well in such a comfortable bed since leaving the Mujahideen camps. Male passengers continued to sexually harass her throughout her trip between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The beautiful white woman Richard is still wearing her tattered clothes. When she fell asleep on the big bed, half of her sexy body was exposed. She never expected that one of the male villagers would dare attack her while she was sleeping in the village chief's residence. She saw that all the men of the village were religious and righteous, like their woman who were about to kill her. When they saw that she had committed adultery and got fucked in her pussy by the dicks of two immoral men from the city inside their holy shrine for the good guardian of God on earth who died a long time ago. So the beautiful, sexy, seeming naked Australian widow slept peacefully, snoring until midnight before the village chief himself approached her hut, and made a sexual attempt on her. When the notorious womanizer came and caught a glimpse of her beautiful face and her supposed sexy body, his sexual appetite became stronger than before. He had never felt this overwhelming sexual desire before for any of the teenage beauties of the village whom he married and violently robbed of their virginity. And so the shameless Caliph Harun al Rashid opened his mouth and eyes stood like a statue. Then he began walking like a wolf towards his unarmed and unaware deer prey. His body burns with uncontrollable lust. He entered the room like a thief in the night and closed the door behind him. Then he slowly started to walk toward the bed where the beautiful and sexy white lady was sleeping. It is like a lion or a hyena sneaking into the cave of an innocent deer. The gazelle, the gazelle is still asleep and does not realize the danger at its fingertips. A child is still sleeping in the same position, her legs and thighs fully exposed. She is lying on her back with her legs spread apart. Such an exciting sexual position made the village chief's heart beat faster and his penis stood like a thick stick, supporting a tent inside his julbab, which was like a woman's nightgown. The sight of her bare legs and white thighs made the wolf strip off his human clothes and stand completely naked beside her like a genie emanating from Aladdin's lamp. If the white woman suddenly awoke and saw the red chimpanzee standing in front of her, she might have mistaken him for a wild beast that had broken into her heart, and fear of him might have caused her sudden death. The chaotic sexual desire arose from lust to madness to sexual obsession. His lust completely overpowered him. Thus he put his hand on her dress and rubbed it, narrating the sight of her sexy little black lingerie drove him crazy. Her revealing side of her sexy little black lingerie drove him crazy. He could now also see her bare shoulders and neck. He started kissing her shoulder, her thighs, and her cheeks. He began to smell her female body as a dog smells its peach. Then he climbed to the top of her body. The heavy weight of his body caused a child to wake up from her deep sleep. Her first reaction is that she is having a terrifying nightmare. She thought she was still in the dark tomb of the shrine and her kidnappers returned and brutally trying to rape her. Then she remembered where she was and thought the hut had collapsed or that the cupboard had fallen on her. But when the wolf started biting her lips and licking her cheeks like a mad dog, her mind conveyed the right message to her. She understood that a bad man in the village was trying to rape her. So she opened her mouth as wide as she could and went on to scream loudly. She tried to free her legs, hands, and the rest of her body, but the heavy weight of the rapist Afghani man rendered her impotent. The horrified Irshad continued screaming at the top of her voice. The village chief was enraged by her shouting. So he inserted his 5 fingers into her mouth and braced her against the pillow. Irshad locked her sharp teeth tightly onto his fingers. The village chief felt her teeth dig into his fat fingers down to the bone. The terrible pain caused his body to roll off hers and fall to the ground. The terrified white woman let go of his fingers and jumped to the ground. She immediately got to her feet and rushed toward the door, opening it. At the door, she found a guard stretching out his arm to block her way. She pushed him with both hands until he fell, and she ran towards the outer door. The guard fell on his back as if a dirt dump truck had emptied its human garbage. The naked chief got up like the naked King Pharaoh and ran after the blood foreign woman. When he came out of the room, he stumbled upon the body of his guard, who was thrown to the ground, and he also fell flat on him, crushing him under his huge body. Then the half naked, fleeing white woman reached the outer door and opened it. Unfortunately, outside, she finds several armed guards and voracious dogs blocking her way to escape from their leader, a notorious womanizer. So these guards and their dogs prevented her attempt to escape. At once, the guards seized the fleeing white woman and took her back to her hut. As soon as the guards brought Irshad back, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed yielded at her. My whole house is guarded by guards armed with rifles and dangerous, ferocious dogs. Each of these large dogs can eat a horse. So, O Christian infidel, never dream of escaping from here. When he said his threatening and warning words, he ran towards her and pushed her against the wall. Irshad was surprised by his blatant attack. Her body hit the wall and she had a terrible pain in her head. Overcoming the pain, she stood up and pushed him back. He came again and attacked her. This time she is ready for him. She scratched his face with her fingernails and kicked his body with her feet. He leaned back, still clutching her long blonde hair. As he pulled her head, she struggled for some time to free her hair from his hands. When she couldn't free herself, she used her legs and kicked him hard across his body. He was forced to free her hair when she hit him with her foot on his erect penis. Once she freed her hair, she ran away from him. He chased around the room like a rooster chasing a chicken. He caught up to her, overtook her, stopped her, and grabbed her waist from behind. She could not use her hands or legs to free her body from his grip. She violently struggled to force to free herself, but she couldn't. While she was being held, the evil man started talking to her again. I wanted to marry you, O white woman, in a halal Islamic marriage, even though you are an infidel Christian according to God's book, the Noble Quran, and the Sunnah of our Prophet Muhammad, who married his Jewish wife Safiya bint Huyay. But you rejected me without a valid reason. Now I will treat you as a maidservant or a slave girl who is owned by my right hand and sleep with you without marriage, as our Prophet Muhammad, the chosen one, slept with Egyptian Christian maidservant Maria, the Coptic girl without marriage. Most likely you are a street prostitute. You were roaming the streets of Kandahar city at night until these two bound men kidnap you in the middle of the road and rape you in your pussy and as inside the holy shrine of God's saint Bakishabik Jabbar al-Maksura. Most likely you became a street prostitute after your Saudi Arabian husband died in the jihad war against the infidels in America. I heard that an uncircumcised Christian infidel woman like you cannot live for 1 week without being sexually fucked by a man with his dick in her pussy or her anus. When Chief Muhammad Ahmed spoke these dirty sentences, he assaulted the Australian widow, Irshad, and pushed her against the wall. Her body hit the wall again and she was in excruciating pain. The old man is addicted to marriage, is big in body like Goliath, and the Australian Roman child is small in size in front of him like the Hebrew shepherd boy David. In fact, Sheikh Ahmed is an extraordinarily tall and strong Afghani. He looks like a Taliban terrorist, and so he forced the Australian widow to the ground. She knelt down and continued to fight for her freedom. He grabbed her hand and twisted it behind her back. Irshad started screaming in pain. Somehow, she managed to grab his body and bite him again. She was released as a result of the pain of her venomous bite. The old geezer felt like a fierce lion, bit off part of his body and wanted to eat him alive. The extremely frightened white woman immediately hit him in the face and rushed away. He chased her again like a male animal chasing its female animal to fuck her pussy. She is screaming now at the top of her voice. The old man in the old demon incarnated in human form was able to reach her and grab her body again. This time he pushed her onto the bed. She fell on her back. He climbed on top onto her half-naked body as his hand braced her head against the pillow. He is completely naked like the ghost who rose as a zombie from his grave. She kicks and screams. He is sweating and shivering. He is like a hungry dog that catches an innocent cat. She continued to struggle under his weight. He brought his big, despicable mouth, which was foaming like a raging camel, to her small mouth, either to kiss her or to bite her. She hit his face with her forehead. Blood flowed from his mouth. He left her and jumped back. Irshad pushed him away and started running. He didn't chase her this time. Instead, he grabbed his bleeding mouth and looked at her. She stood in a corner. When she realized he wasn't attacking her, she attacked him instead. He managed to hit her before she touched him. His blow this time was so strong that it made her fall to the ground. As soon as she fell, he jumped on her body like an old stray dog, a squirrel jumping over a small pet doggy. She couldn't struggle much this time. He grabbed her dress and tore it in half. When she saw that her dress was open in two parts, she resisted. But he kept tearing her clothes off. She kicked him, she hit him, she slapped him. Irshad scratched and beat him, but all those blows didn't stop him from stripping her clothes. He kept undressing her piece by piece. He grabbed her black bra and bullied from her large breast. The sight of her fully exposed boobs only added to his sexual frenzy. Before he attacked her again and raped her, she hit him on the stomach with her right foot. That last kick made him stop and back off. When she was released, she too got up and walked backwards. She is stunned and amazed at what is happening to her. For a while, both of them struggled to breathe. Irshad stood afar and looked at him as a dangerous beast or a terrible demon. He looked at her with red eyes filled with lust. His mouth is still bleeding. He could now see her naked body standing in front of him. Her nakedness was covered by only a small piece of underwear. Her black underwear hung like a bandage over her naked body. He is also naked. His cock is swollen, and he's standing like a gunner on top of a military tank. The sight of her naked body prompted him to try again. He was overcome with sexual lust and attacked her again. She hit him violently on his head, face, and body, but she couldn't push him away. It seemed that the old human piece has turned into a predatory dinosaur. He had already ripped off all of her clothes. She was left with only her black panties, which were like wearing a swimsuit in the swimming pool. Then he forced her to the ground. She struggles now less than before. She is exhausted. She felt that her strength could let her down at any time. She loses confidence in her ability. She understood that her weaker feminine strength would not be able to struggle forever against his superior masculine strength. He forced her under his heavy weight. She can now fight only with her mouth and eyes. She screams and curses him in his face. She referred to him by every bad name she knows in the Afghani language. He didn't notice her words. His only goal now is to pull off her last cover and force his red cock inside her white hairy pussy. The Australian widow is like a dying, drowned woman in deep waters who clings to whatever comes her way. She grabs his hair and bullied. She scratches his face. She's bet on him. She cries for help. But all her efforts did not drive him away from her body. He is like a vampire who found fresh human flesh and devoured it. Then she felt his right hand grab her small underwear and began to pull it off. At that critical time, Irshad grabbed his shoulder and beat him again. He was screaming loudly like a coward. Then he left her body and tried to jump off her body. She did not leave his shoulder. He was screaming even louder and hitting her all over her body to get his shoulder off her teeth. Her teeth seemed to be like sharp nails driven deep into his flesh. Finally, he pulled violently and released himself. He hit her in the face and ran toward the door. She took a small stool and threw it at him. He quickly reached the door and opened it. Then he fled in terror. He fled from her in a terror, just like one of those two cowardly men who kidnapped her from the city and attempted to rape her. And when they could not, they locked her in the holy shrine and escaped from her. She ran to the door, but he locked it behind him from the outside and imprisoned her inside. Irshad got to the door too late. He started banging on the door with both hands, shouting loudly, "Coward, coward, open the door, you evil man. If you come back, I will kill you. I will break your square bald head. May God kill you, you cowardly and insolent old man." The Australian white woman, who was severely beaten and physically abused, kept knocking on the door for a long time. As she banged on the door, she would shout her threats and call for one of the guards, servants, and family members to come and save her from the evil usurper, chief of their village. She also tried to open the door, but she could not. After some time, Irshad felt very tired and exhausted. He stopped her vain attempts to try to call someone to save her or to open the door. She then retreated to a corner and sat down. She's anxious, exhausted, and gasping for breath. Every part of her naked body caused her excruciating pain. She was bleeding profusely from her teeth, forehead, cheeks, stomach, back, shoulders, hands, and legs. Her clothes are scattered in small pieces all over the hut. She became naked, wounded, broken, and as if she had had a fight with a beast. She is in a very miserable condition. Never in her life had she expected it to turn into such a despicable situation. She hated herself. She wished she was dead and gone before such a fateful day came in her life. Her eyes are wide open. She couldn't make out the things in front of her eyes. She closed and opened her eyes several times before she could clearly see the things around her. Her mind began working again, and her eyes could now discern the bitter physical world in which she had awoken and found herself living. In those critical moments, she remembered her revolver loaded with live bullets. Alas, she remembered that the evil village chief, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad, took her defense weapon as soon as she reached his house. At that difficult time in her life, which filled with many years of abuse, suffering, and violence in the Islamic world, the Australian Christian girl is Suzanne Peterson, who became the Muslim woman Irshad Shambari. Remember how her loving parents, Christian friends in the church, and fellow students in the University of Sydney tried to prevent her from marrying a Muslim immigrant man from Saudi Arabia, but she rejected their wise advice. She turned her back on everyone. She even rejected her Lord Jesus Christ and followed God's alleged prophet Muhammad. She left Christianity and converted to Islam. She changed her name from Suzanne to Irshad. Today, she knew and understood that she had sold herself to Satan and became his slave. Since the day Susan married one of Satan's children, the devil, the devil became her father in law, and she became his daughter in law. Irshad becomes a helpless wife in the hands of a tyrannical, controlling, and abusive husband. She also became a sexual object for lustful men in the third world. These wicked Muslim men see nothing but fresh meat in a woman, which their demonic God has given them the divine right to devour and eat her like cannibal beasts. The white woman has been abused, raped, tortured, and enslaved for a long time by an evil tyrant who deceived her through his false religiosity. In such an abusive Islamic world, the Australian wife Irshad Shamari spent 3 years in Saudi Arabia and 5 years in the Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan. During those 8 years, she had not encountered the evil she now encounters in the lustful village chief's house. She figured she might not make it out alive from the house of this notorious womanizer and sexual pervert. She concludes that the evil village chief and his armed guards and voracious guard dogs will not let her out of their village alive. The leader will abuse her and enslave her because she has become, as he told her, the slave of his right hand, whom his religion has entrusted to him. He could rape her day and night without the sanctity of the bond of lawful marriage because his Quran gave him that right in Surah An-Nisa 4 verse 3. Irshad has concluded that she would never see her 7 children again. However, the brave foreign white woman decided to kill her abuser and expected his armed guards to kill her. She would rather be killed or become a prostitute on the street of Kandahar city than marry against her will a sex predator who is as old as her grandfather. Chapter 17: The White Witch's Unforgivable Crime. On that fateful night, as soon as the news of the brutal murder of their chief reached the ears of the people of the village, all the residents gathered around the house of the Honorable Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad. They came in large numbers of men and women, boys and girls and children. They had come there to punish the impure Christian infidel white witch who discredited the holy mountain of their shrine by committing adultery inside it with 2 men. She is also the white whore demon who killed the good chief of their village. They expected the village elders to pass the sentence of stoning on the wicked white woman and bring her to the open ground to be stoned to death. The village elders call an emergency meeting and collectively agree not to send the white woman to the police, but to be executed by the villagers for the terrible crimes she committed in their holy shrine and peaceful village Sharaf al Banat, or a girl's honor. Accordingly, the sheikhs sentenced the Australian woman Irshad to death on charges of desecrating their sacred mountain of the righteous saint and killing their blessed leader. May God have mercy on his soul. The death sentence has to be carried out of the out on the culprit white woman on the following day afternoon when the sun reaches the heart of the sky. The elders differ in the method of executing the foreign white woman who is declared by them as a criminal adulteress and bloodthirsty murderer. Some prefer to follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad who killed the infidel old hag woman Kirfa for criticizing him. The biography of the Prophet mentioned that the Messenger of Allah killed Girfa in a painful and cruel way. He tied her hands and feet with ropes on two camels. Then he drove the huge brutes in opposite directions and split her body in two. Accordingly, some of the village elders wanted the infidel Christian white witch Irshad Shamri to be subjected to such a brutal death that the wicked old hag woman was executed. Kirfa. The biography of the Prophet mentioned that Kirfa was the chieftain of a large Quraysh tribe and the wisest woman in the Arabian Peninsula. But other leaders among the village elders prefer to stone the unbelieving Christian woman to death. The latter proposal was accepted on the grounds that everyone in the village could take part in the killing of the harlots of Babylon, who had desecrated the holy shrine of the righteous guardian of God on earth and killed the chief of the village. Meanwhile, the stabbed body of the infamous womanizer and rapist Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad was transferred to Kandahar General Hospital. He was dying when some of his bodyguards and relatives took him to the city hospital. Some of the elders have already concluded that their leader was assassinated by a white Christian infidel woman who was an adulteress. Christian infidel. They conclude that the foreign blonde woman is almost likely white witch and the devil's wife. Firstly, she is the adulteress or who discredited their holy shrine by committing adultery with two immoral men inside. Secondly, it is the white witch who killed the blessed head of their village. May God have mercy on him and put him in peace and dwell him with his 72 virgin nymphes or houris in paradise. Therefore, she is the prostitute, the witch, the impure Christian infidel, and the circumcised wife of the damning devil who brought great abominations to their peaceful village Sharaf al Banat. Accordingly, they decided to kill her by stoning her to death as a punishment for what her impure hands had done. They want every villager, male and female, to take part in killing the cursed Christian white witch who is the wife of the stoned Satan. After issuing their death verdict, some armed guards dragged the widowed Australian woman Irshad from the hut where she was kept in it at night while she was completely naked and tied by strong ropes to a big open field in the center of the village, which is used by men and boys for football matches and for donkey and horse racing. While the guards were dragging her, many village women and girls took off their shoes and threw them on the naked body of the so-called white witch and impure Christian infidel. Young underage girls spat on her face. Some of the male children picked up small stones and threw them at her body. Irshad's face was disfigured, and her already naked body was filled with numerous blows, slaps, and floggings by the relatives and the guards of the slain sheikh, the village chief. As they take her to her brutal execution, the condemned Australian woman is subjected to cruel torture and unbearable emotional pain from all those blows, kicks, and insults. At that critical time, Irshad remembered that Canadian Muslim girl who was stoned to death by the Mujahideen in the camps long ago. She remembered because of her wrong advice that the innocent Afghani sweetheart Shahrazad was killed in a very cruel way and her cedar lover was brutally flogged and crippled for life in a wheelchair. As a result of this memory, Irshad concludes that Shahrazad's blood has fallen on her head. She hopes that her execution will not be as painful as when she saw how the Canadian Muslim girl who was stoned suffered. She longs for days to save her from her unbearable torment as they drag her on the ground while she is completely naked like an animal being led to the slaughter. Australian woman, Irshad hears that the villagers condemn her with many dirty words of insults, curses, and condemnation. She tried to talk to them and tell them that she killed the village chief because he was a dirty old man and he tried to rape her while she was sleeping in his shit hut at his demon haunted house. Their loud voices and their many insults did not allow her to speak to them. Yet she continued to scream and beg for her life. Many of them are saying, "We are taking the white witch to the slaughter place." During those last tragic moments of her life, Irshad recalled how she had managed to protect herself from being brutally raped by the evil chief. When he made another attempt to rape her, while she was stripped by him completely naked, she used a small metal she had found in the little Samanina's hut where she was imprisoned and stabbed him in the stomach. He felt like a raging camel hit on the head with an axe. Foam started flowing from his despicable mouth, and blood trickled down from his stabbed naked body like a red liquid and covered everything. Even his abundant blood covered her naked body, which was bleeding with her pure blood. Immediately, his armed guards rushed inside and started beating her mercilessly until she fell. Then they dragged her half conscious body out, locked her up in another small hut, which was created to house dogs. After that, they spread the disturbing news around the village that the infidel, white Christian infidel woman had killed their great leader, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed. One guard went around the village in the middle of the night, just like the Musahirati in Ramadan month, while announcing in loud the brutal murder of the great chief Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed by the white infidel woman who committed adultery with two men inside their holy shrine in the mountain of God. For those who are not in the know, the Musahirati is one of the oldest, most deeply rooted Islamic traditions found during the holy months of fasting, which is called Ramadan. Al Musahirati is the name given to the person who walks and beats a drum in residential areas at night to wake people up to eat their sahur, a meal eaten before the beginning of the fast, before morning prayers. Meanwhile, the medical staff of the city hospital saved the life of the stabbed village chief. His bleeding stopped and the wound caused by the stab wound of the white foreign woman Richard was swinging up. His guards knew that the very frightened Christian woman used a sharpened metal and stabbed the leader in the stomach when he made another attempt to rape her. But none of them dared to confront the family of their village chief with the truth or to report to the hospital or the police for what reason she had killed him. They concluded that he died and departed to Jannatul Firdaus, where there are virgin nymphs or 72 holy girls for him. Therefore, they decided to hold a martyr's wedding for him after his funeral. They believed he is like the martyrs of Allah who did not die, but he is alive in paradise and enjoying fucking with his big fellas, the booths of the 72 virgins. The Quran said those who died in the way of Allah are not dead, but are alive with Allah in paradise. Sing not of those who are slain in Allah's way as dead. Nay, they lie, they live, finding their sustenance in the presence of their Lord. Surah Al Imran 3, verse 169. The guards took his naked, stabbed, murdered body in a car and transported it to the largest hospital in Kandahar city. After his deep wound was treated, the sheikh remained in a coma in the intensive care unit. The hospital staff then reported the matter to the police authorities. The police issued an arrest warrant for the white foreign Christian woman who stabbed and attempted to assassinate the chief of the village, Sharaf al Banat. When they learned that his life had been saved, the relatives of Sheikh Ahmed lied to the policemen by telling them that the foreign Christian woman, Irshad Shammar, is a new Christian bride for their leader, whom he married according to the Holy Quran and the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. For some selfish motive, the Christian bride refused to allow her Afghani Muslim groom to have sex with her on their first wedding night. She made a condition to the village chief that unless he wrote half of his property in her name and divorced his three other Muslim wives, she would not allow him to sleep with her. The rich leader refused to transfer half of his property to her and tried to forcefully sleep with her because Islamic Sharia allows him to rape her because she is his first wife by law. Before sleeping with her, he was forced to beat her with his big stick, subjugate her to him, because the Quran allows a husband to beat his disobedient wife in Surah An-Nisa 4, verse 34. These relatives also forged a marriage certificate and presented it as evidence to the police authorities against the so-called disobedient and rebellious Christian wife. The false marriage contract was prepared by the Imam of the village mosque and signed by two male witnesses, and another fake signature that they claim was the signature of the groom, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed. They knew that Islamic law does not require the bride's signature in her marriage contract. The relatives of the notorious womanizer paid large bribes to the Imam of the only mosque in the village and his false two male witnesses. When the Kandahar police reached the village, they found that some men had dug a hole and buried half of the white Christian woman's naked body inside the ground. It was a sweltering summer day. Unjustly sentenced to death, Australian woman Richard felt as if she had been buried in a molten volcano boiling with fiery lava. She was sweating from head to her feet as if she was pouring hot blood, and her naked body was burning with caustic acid. Her state of mind could not be described in words. She became very frightened when she saw these villagers gathering around her like wild beasts surrounding a wounded deer and unable to move. She could hear her heart pounding in her chest and her head ringing like the bells of hell. And she concluded that she would be killed the evilest of killing, and her soul would come out and land in the fire of hell. Once again, the Muslim widow, convicted of stoning, Irshad Shammari, remembered that apostate Christian girl, Suzanne Peterson, who distanced herself from her Christian religion and converted to the cursed Islamic religion. She regretted that she refused to accept the advice of her Christian parents, brother, friends, and classmates, and turned her back on the Lord Jesus Christ and embraced the alleged prophet of God, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Kilab. But what regret could do now after it was too late? In those difficult moments, the Australian widow Irshad wished that someone would shoot her in the head and free her from those horrific feelings that control her mind and heart and torment her body. It is either a miracle or a sheer luck that the Afghani policemen in Kandahar made it to the soccer field and dog race just in time to stop the execution of the Christian foreign white lady by the angry villagers who thought she killed their righteous village chief and defiled their holy shrine. When the policeman arrived, the villagers started collecting stones, bricks, and firewood. They decided after stoning her and then burning her unclean body with fire and turning it into ashes. They are waiting for their elders to announce the start of the stoning ritual ceremony. Policemen rushed inside the stadium and ordered the elders to stop the execution immediately. When the elders refused to obey the orders, the police fired tear gas to disperse the angry crowd. Some of the enraged villagers threw stones at the policemen themselves. This led to the police firing live bullets at those who continued to throw stones at them. Some were shot dead, some seriously injured, and some of them died by stampede and trembling thousands of feet under. Despite this, most of them managed to escape alive. Because of the fear of being killed by the live bullets, many boys and girls fled outside the village and hid among the trees, hills, creeks, and inside the dens of hyenas and foxes. Many unmarried girls, teenage girls, and other female minors were gang raped by old folks and young men in the wilderness. They took advantages of finding those unmarried girls being alone in the wilderness for the first time without their male relatives to protect their bodies and virginities. After the angry villagers dispersed and fled to their huts, some of them fled outside the village. The police dug up the body of the naked Christian foreigner who was buried alive from inside the ground as if they had exhumed the grave of a dead white girl and took out her remains. Then they put her under arrest. By this time, the naked white Australian widow had become unconscious and half dead, either from the sweltering heat or the unbearable terror of being buried alive and attempted to be stoned to death. Chapter 18, Marriage of a Child Bride. It is difficult to know what happened at the same time to one of her 7 children on the 2 nights of the rape of the Australian mother child in the village Sharaf al Banat by the evil chief Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad, whether it was just a coincidence or whether it was predetermined by God before the foundation of the world. Muslims believe that everything good or bad that happens in a person's life is already decided and written by God before he was created and born. For example, the murderer, the thief, the adulterer, and the adulteress kill, steal, and commit adultery because God predestined, commanded, and ordained for them to do those evils before He created them. Therefore, Muslims consider everything they do, good or bad, as their kismet in life, which was written to them by Allah and cannot avoid doing the will of God. This Islamic belief is worse than the teaching of the law of karma in Hinduism, which states that the rich man and the poor man reap the fruits of their deeds in their past lives, whether they were good or bad. The rich man is wealthy because of his good karma in his previous life, and the poor is destitute due to his evil deeds in his former life. Simply put, a homeless Hindu beggar dying of starvation on the street of Bombay could be the German tyrant Adolf Hitler in Berlin City in his previous life. It so happened that At the same time that the Australian Muslim widow Irshad was fighting the human sex predator, the chief of Sharaf al Banat village, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed, who tried to rape her in his residence. Her minor first daughter Aisha al Shambari was going through the same bitter experience of a brutal rape by her guardian, Mullah Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hamid. When the Australian widow left the Mujahideen camps and entrusted the custody of her 7 children to her late husband Amir, the marriage of her first daughter was arranged to the same old man who was supposed to protect and care for her as a guardian. He was supposed to treat her and serve her as his adopted granddaughter. Faris, the religious leader Mullah Abu Hamid, knows that there is no adoption in Islam because the Quran forbids adoption. When the Prophet saw the wife of his adopted son, Zayd ibn Muhammad, who was called Zayd bint Jahsh, she was half nude, that is, almost naked in her tent, and he erected his penis and lusted after her. Therefore, the Quran annulled adoption. Then God divorced Zayd's wife from him and commanded his beloved and preferred prophet over all other prophets and messengers, Muhammad, to take the beautiful and Zainab to bed in a halal manner. Accordingly, the old geezer, Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hamid, did not consider that the children of the Australian white widow were his adoptive children, and thus permitted himself to marry her minor virgin firstborn daughter. Aisha is a few months, a little more than 10 years old, while her alleged legal Muslim husband is an elderly man of 72 years of age, with other 3 Muslim wives, sons, daughters, and large number of grandchildren. Although Aisha is just a child, her Australian mother Irshad taught her that a girl will not be ready for marriage until she reaches the stage of mental maturity and physical preparity at the age of 18. At that age, she will reach the stage of womanhood, and this is the state of being a mature woman, physically and mentally sane. Therefore, it is not permissible to consider the marriage of a minor girl until after she reaches the age of 18 years or over, or when she reaches the official age of physical, mental, and psychological maturity, assumes legal responsibility. So when Aisha learned that the mullah took advantage of her mother's absence and married her, she decided not to let him touch her body, and in her heart decided to kill him if he tried to rape her. But Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid is a more evil and dangerous man than the notorious womanizer, the village chief Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed. He is a trained terrorist and has learned how to handle his victim. On the same day on which he performed his marriage to her in the mosque, the mullah decided to complete his marriage. The mullah decided to complete his marriage to his child bride, Aisha Mustafa Shambari. The dirty old man decided to rape the 10-year-old underage girl under the pretext of the Islamic halal marriage of female children, based on the example of the Prophet Muhammad with child bride Aisha binti Abu Bakr, who was 6 years old when he married her and became 9 years old when he began to rape her. Before consummating his marriage with his child first wife, the old hag groom sent some elderly Afghani woman for his new bride, and this sorceress informed the little girl that she had married according to the Holy Quran of God and the blessed Sunnah of His Messenger, their blessed leader Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. Aisha got angry and told them that no one has the right to marry her until she is 18 years old, and she must choose who she wants to marry. The old woman mocked the child Aisha and told her that each of them got married before she was 10 years old. So this old Afghan woman laughed at her objection. They also considered that her desire to fall in love and choose her own life partner in Afghanistan was just a, a daydream of a foolish little girl like herself. They also told her that no Muslim woman, young or underage, can decide when and whom she marries. Her father is the one who was given the right to marry her by the law of God and his prophet to any man, whether he was young or old, whom he chose from among men. Moreover, they cited the example of the Prophet Muhammad, which is always cited by Muslims to justify sexual abuse of female children or pedophilia. The aged woman said that the infallible Prophet of God married his wife Aisha when she was 6 years old and had sex with her when she was 9. In the middle of the night, the bride to be, Aisha, was forced to wake up when her groom, Mullah Abu Hamid, attempted to consummate his marriage to her. She opened her eyes, got to her feet, and looked around. Her eyes saw the old man standing in front of her like a red devil. The very thing that crossed her mind was to kill him on the spot before he could touch her. The old hag man, with a big smile on his bearded face, started slowly walking towards her. Aisha remained standing in her place, looking at him with eyes full of fear. As soon as he was within her reach, her hand caught his throat. Although she is only a 10-year-old girl, Aisha has the body of a 14-year-old girl and very strong hands. The old man struggled to free his throat, but his efforts were in vain. Aisha continued to grip the old goat's throat. He started kicking and hitting her body, but she wouldn't let go of his throat. The struggle continued until they both fell to the ground inside the tent. The old man fell, and she was on top of him. His struggle stopped and his eyes became wide open. Aisha probably needed a few minutes to turn the old man into a dead body under her body, but suddenly a violent blow fell on her head. It was such a strong blow that it rendered her unconscious. When her hands released his throat, the old man pushed her unconscious body and rose to his feet. Then the old Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hamid said with a panting voice like the howling of an ogre, "Thank you, Abu Huraira." A big man who hit the little bride Aisha with his stick said, "I have already warned you, our mullah, to be careful of the daughter of a foreign white woman, born and raised as a Christian infidel. But you did not heed my advice. She would have strangled you had I not gone out quickly and hit her on the head with my crutch. All women are damning and familiar in their cunning. We have been warned by the Holy Quran of their guile and deception. She is not up for anything except for fucking her pussy in bed and having kids. At least I followed your advice, Abu Huraira, and kept you hidden under her bed. O Honorable Imam, Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hamid, what should we what should be done now? Go and get the maid Pereira. The large man left the room and returned a few minutes later, followed by a woman. She's a Pakistani woman. As soon as she saw the unconscious little girl, she went to her. Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid said, "Wait a minute, Brera. Before you treat her, you must undress her completely." The maid followed the instruction without asking any questions, and then stripped the body of the child Aisha of all her clothes, even her small underwear. After that, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid whispered a few words into the ears of Abu Huraira. In response, the servant took Aisha's clothes and hid them in a closet and pulled out a long rope. Then he took Aisha's hands and brought them behind her back and tied them together. Afterward, he picked up her unconscious naked body and laid it on the bed. Then he pinned her legs tightly to the edge of the bed. After that, he crept under the bed and hid as before. Then the old man said, "Now, Pereira, go to her and revive her." It took the maid a few minutes to revive the body of the unconscious child, Aisha. The maid used cold water to rejuvenate the unconscious body of Aisha's minor child. When Aisha opened her eyes, she saw the maid smiling and greeting her, and she did neither greet her nor she did smile at her. Her head is still heavy, and it hurts because of the heavy blow. She then saw the sinister old man standing behind the bed with an extremely angry face. Fear filled her heart again when she realized he was still alive. She remembered that she had killed him through strangling, or was about to kill him. "Thank you, my maid Pereira. You may leave now." The Pakistani maid immediately left the tent. The old man looked at Aisha's naked body with eyes full of lust. She looked at him with eyes full filled with fear and anger. Then she saw him begin to undress piece by piece until he was completely naked. She was disgusted to see such a terrifying scene. The old man came and sat beside her in the bed. She tried to get up and choke his neck again, but discovered that she had been she had both hands on her back. She struggled to bring them in front of her, but she couldn't. She realized that they are tied together. Then she tried to use her legs to hit him in the ugly face, but she couldn't either. She understood that he had also tied her legs. She began shaking her naked, sweaty body violently to free her hands and feet, but all her efforts were in vain. After some time, she became exhausted. Her body is full of sweat. She fell on her back. Her eyes are looking everywhere for escape. The naked old man kept sitting near her in the same bed. She tried again to free herself, but she could not. The dirty old man waited until her strength of resistance was gone. Then he extended his hand and placed it on her naked body. It felt as if an eagle's claws had sunk into her tender body. When he pressed against her flesh, it felt as if he was squeezing blood out of it. This act gave her a very bad feeling that turned into excruciating pain. Then she felt his other hand grab her face, which made her feel unbearable pain too. Her body shrank. After that, she saw his face coming close to hers to kiss her. She felt as if a venomous snake was about to bite her. So she started to swing her head sideways. Despite this, the old ogre began kissing her neck, shoulders, and cheeks. The little girl Aisha felt as if a raging dog was licking and biting her body. Then she felt the weight of his fleshless skeleton more above her. When he was sure she couldn't resist anymore, he grabbed her head and braced it against the pillow. The child bride Aisha became motionless. She wishes the roof would fall on them and kill them before the evil mullah could rape her. When he realized that she could no longer swing her head, the old man lustfully looked at her lips. Then he brought his filthy smelling, kissed her cheeks, and licked her forehead with his tongue. Then he moved his to hers. As soon as his lips touched her mouth, she bit them. It was such a strong bite that the old man felt as though her teeth were like sharp nails that were dug inside his thin lips. She kept biting them because she knew this was her last weapon of defense. The old man struggled to free his lips from her sharp teeth, but he couldn't. He scratched her cheeks and pulled her hair, but she did not leave his lips. Every effort on his part increases his pain. He wanted to bar his lips so that he would open his vile mouth and summon his bodyguard, Abu Huraira. Aisha kept biting his lips and then made him mouthless. The old groom fears that his child bride will bite him to death, so he starts kicking his legs like a raging donkey dying of an incurable disease. Repeated kicking caused Abu Huraira to come out of hiding. When the servant looked at the bed, he saw his master, the aged groom, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, in a state of complete defeat. The child bride Aisha bites the elderly groom, Muhammad, as if she was hungry child grabbing her mother's breast and beginning to suck milk from it. But the evil old man Muhammad felt like a vampire sucking blood from his mouth. As a result, the terrorist Abu Huraira hit the child bride on the head again with his big stick. As a result, the child, Aisha, fainted again. Although the lips of the bedefied Muhammad were freed, he could not move. Thus, Abu Huraira lifted him from the bed and stretched his body to the floor. After that, he ran outside and called the maid, Breira. When the maid came, she was shocked to see the naked old man lying half dead on the floor with his lips bleeding profusely. Then the maid servant saw the child bride Aisha lying on the bed, naked with her mouth full of blood. She saw that Abu Huraira killed a small wife in revenge for his wounded master. Breira shouted, "Did you kill her? She is not dead yet. She's the one who almost killed Muhammad Abu Hamid with her sharp teeth. Had I not saved him from her deadly bite at the right time, I think she is a small white witch like her infidel white Christian mother who left her and fled to her country, Australia." Ignoring his words, the maid knelt on the old man's body and began to treat his bleeding lips, his trembling, groaning, and his bleeding mouth gnashing loudly like a cannibal munching on the flesh of a human being. The pain increased when the maid touched his beaten lips. Then she put a big bandage over his lips. The old man looked terrible with that kind of a creepy mouth, as if he was wearing a scary Halloween mask. Then Abu Huraira spread a large white bedsheet over his master's naked body, making it look like a dead body prepared for its funeral. The Pakistani maid Breira took pity on the child bride Aisha when she saw her still unconscious while she was naked and tied to the bed. She took another bedsheet and covered her naked body. Then she treated her with care and compassion. She wished that the old man and his bodyguard would not hit the innocent child bride again. When Aisha regained consciousness, she deliberately gave her some sleeping pills. Then she told the old bridegroom Muhammad and his servant Abu Huraira that the underage bride Aisha was not in good condition and therefore it was not advisable for her husband to try to have sex with her. She said that she might die if the mullah tried again to sleep with her because she was a virgin and circumcised Muslim girl who has a small stitched pussy with which was zipped, zapped, and securely closed up by female genital mutilation when she was a child. The two evil men believed the bed and allowed the child bride to sleep inside the tent all that night. When she woke up the next morning, the child bride Aisha thought she had had a bad nightmare. Then she remembered her struggling and suffering with the dirty old man who tried to rape her twice. When she looked around the tent, she knew this was a real horror. She remembered that the old man made a second attempt to rape her, but she bit his lips. Aisha also remembered that it was a very painful bite, and most likely he died or got sick. In either case, he may have been hospitalized or buried in a grave. She wished the second possibility had happened to him. After that, she felt very hungry and thirsty. Aisha knew that she had not eaten or drunk anything since she learned through the old Afghan woman that she had become the fourth wife of the old mullah Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hamid, whom she looked up to as a father and a guardian for her and her siblings. She thought she was still naked and tied to the bed. She decided to release herself and run away before the old man came again. She pulled her right leg violently. She was surprised when her leg moved freely. She tried her left leg and her hands and realized she was no longer bound. She sat on the bed and looked at her body. The child bride Aisha found herself being dressed up and not naked. She got to her feet and headed toward the mirror. Once she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw that a beautiful dress had been put on her. Her hair is well combed. There are new shoes on her feet. Despite this, Aisha felt tended to her hunger and thirst. She felt that she must eat and drink something before the old man, Muhammad, came back. She knows that she needs her strength to fight him in case he tries to abuse her again and rape her under the pretext of Islamic lawful child marriage. She waited for a long time for someone to come, but no one came to her. Finally, she began to think that the old man Muhammad was deliberately starving her to reduce her strength. When night came, she became very weak and tired, and so she slept on the bed. When she woke up again, it was morning time. She tried to sit down, but she could not. Her body was trembling with fear. She knew she was sick. She tried again to get up, but she couldn't. She wanted to scream for help, but her voice failed her. When she looked around the tent, she couldn't clearly see the things in front of her eyes. She's breathing hard now. Aisha felt as if Aisha felt she was dying. This feeling caused her to panic. Thus she gathered her remaining strength and stood on her trembling feet. Her heart was beating fast and her head was aching badly. She saw that everything around her was moving quickly. She lost control and fell to the ground. She sustained injuries due to the fall. She lost consciousness for a while. She remained comatose. After a while, she regained consciousness. She gathered her strength again and crawled on her knees to the bed. When she got to bed, she pushed her body up with great difficulty. Her body was now half lying on the bed and the other half lying on the floor. In this pathetic situation, the little child bride Aisha remained for a long time. She is no longer aware of herself. The third night came and went, but it eluded her because of her miserable state. On the fourth day, while the child bride Aisha was lying on the bed, half conscious and half naked, the pedophile Muhammad, who loves to have sex with small female children, returned. His lips were still wrapped in bandages. He looked fresh and strong. His back on his own. He sat next to the little child Aisha. He placed his right hand on her body and began to feel her lustfully. His animal lust blinded his eyes and prevented him from seeing the condition of the innocent minor girl Aisha as she was dying due severe beatings and deliberate starvation. He slowly rotated her body until it was completely rotated. Then he began to touch her shoulders, cheeks, lips, and legs with lust. When he made sure that she was unaware of his touch, he began to undress her. After that, he took off the wolf's clothes and rode over her dying body. By rubbing and stroking her body, the innocent child Aisha regained half of her consciousness. Although she opened her eyes and saw the old man Muhammad in a dull black silhouette, she still could not move a limb on her weak body. She felt his skeleton as if an old hedgehog was moving on her body, his bones sink into her flesh like sharp stones. His toothless mouth, from which a stench emanated, approached her like a venomous serpent. Then he started sucking and licking her lips like a hungry dog. This caused her an ugly feeling that made her vomit. As she vomited, she felt all rusty metal forcing itself into her tiny vagina. This made the child bride Aisha feel unbearable pain as if Muhammad was cutting her into two halves with a saw. Due to female genital mutilation that made the opening of her vagina smaller than the eye of a needle, the innocent child was subjected to much unbearable psychological torture and physical pain before the evil mullah could penetrate her. She wanted to cry from the unbearable pain she felt in her vagina, but her voice let her down because of her parched throat with thirst and her empty stomach from starvation. Her tears started running like hot acid water down her cheeks as the old man brutally raped her. Before he could fully penetrate her tiny vagina, the child brother Aisha lost consciousness and fell into a deep coma. Despite that, the pedophile Muhammad continued his evil deed until he raped the child bride Aisha. Chapter 19. She is cast inside a woeful, scary dungeon. The Afghani police took the so-called murderess White Peach, the evil witch, and the unclean Christian fidel Australian widow Ishad from the village inhabited by demons of rape and death to the city of Kandahar and detained her in a confinement of a dark room. When the suspected woman Irshad Shambari entered the darkened room, she could not see anything around her. Her eyes are not yet used to seeing in the dark. However, her other senses gave her an idea of what was inside that dark room. First, her nose transmitted to her the most unpleasant odor she had ever inhaled in her life. It is a combination of the stench of urine, feces, stool, vomiting, sweating, farting, and bad breath. Her stomach reacted immediately and she vomited everything she ate in the house of her rabbis in the village of Sharaf al Banat. When there was nothing left in her stomach to vomit, she began to feel nauseous. After that, her ears began to hear snoring, moaning, crying, and gnashing of teeth. Then her innate intelligence revealed to her that there were some living beings who shared the dark place where she had been cast. But whether they were people, animals, or ghosts, she couldn't tell. To protect herself from those invisible creatures, Irshad remained motionless. After some time, tired and weak, she sat down slowly and carefully. Then she folded her legs together. She hesitated to stretch her legs and touch one of the inmates of that dark cell for fear of one of the ghosts feeling humiliated, attacking her, killing her, and then eating her raw flesh like a cannibal. Then she took out her handkerchief and put it in her nose and mouth to protect herself from this deadly pestilence of the pungent smell. Irsha sat on her feet and hugged her legs for a long time. Her face rested on her knees. Of course, such a position is not comfortable for her. Whenever she felt pain in her feet or legs. She stood for a while and then sat down. She understood that she had to spend her first night in that dark room, standing and sitting. However, her physical bed is nothing compared to the psychological torture she has been subjected to since her arrest in the village. She still did not fully believe that she had been saved from those barbarians who wanted to kill her for having done no crime other than to protect herself from being raped by that evil chief. Irshad's mind kept remembering those two terrifying nights she spent fighting against that terrorist human beast. Those painful memories kept bobbing up over and over on her mind screen like a horror movie. Even her fight with her captors inside the shrine wasn't so terrible compared to her fight with that evil womanizer. Another thing also tormented the mind of the Australian widow, fearing that she would be sentenced to death for killing Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed, the head of the village. What will happen to her seven children if she is executed? All these thoughts have been tormenting her mind and heart ever since she was rescued by the police and placed under arrest. The policeman gave her an old woman's Islamic dress and ordered her to close and hide her nakedness because she was completely naked when they rescued her from her assailants. The Australian woman was placed in that darkened room at midnight. She spent the first 3 hours struggling with her physical and psychological torture. She still has 3 hours before dawn breaks. She began to fall asleep due to her lack of sleep during those painful nights spent in the dark shrine and the residence of the evil village chief. She tried hard to resist falling asleep. Irshad is afraid of the dire consequences of sleeping in such a dark room. However, she was overcome by her drowsiness and physical fatigue. She was dozing off but kept waking up in a growl now and then. At around 6 o'clock in the morning, the imprisoned widowed Australian woman woke up from her painful sleep. She opened her eyes wide enough to see where she was being imprisoned and who was with her. When she saw the occupants of that dark room, she wished that they were scary animals, mad people, or a ghost, and not ordinary human beings. They do not differ in much in their outward appearance from animals and beasts. Their faces, eyes, and bodies have not been washed and are full of dirt, sweat, and mud. Their eyes yellow in color, and their hairs have not been combed properly. Their clothes are also full of dirt and torn. Some of them are wearing dirty rags. All these creatures are women. The pretty blonde Australian woman saw herself as a colorful butterfly or a white lotus flower that had suddenly grown in the midst of mud and dirt. Early morning sunshine revealed her such horrible faces. Irshad became so terrified by their miserable circumstances. As she looked at them in fear and terror, she saw that some of them were doing incredible things before her eyes that only stray animal can do in the open. Some of them urinated, others vomited, and some did unspeakably horribly dirty things like boobing. The Australian foreign woman, Irshad, closed her eyes and started crying. She couldn't believe that humans would be degraded to such a low level. She wished she had died and gone instead of being imprisoned in such a filthy place. Hours passed one after another like centuries. Morning came and went, and noon came dragging its tail behind it. Noontime is the worst time of the day. The cell had no windows. Therefore, it is getting hotter and hotter as the noon continues to grow. The stench is intensified terribly. Health inmates sweat profusely. Their dirty bodies emit an odor similar to that of decomposing corpses of unburied dead people. In such miserable conditions, the white woman remained imprisoned and spent the morning, noon, and evening. The night is much better for her than the day, for the darkness of the night hid from her eyes the wretched faces of the captive woman. At around 4 p.m., the Australian widow Irshad Sambari began to feel the hunger pangs. Her hunger made her notice some strange phenomena of the woman of hell. Until she became very hungry, Irshad never saw any of the infernus inmates eat food or drink water. It seemed not one of the inhabitants of hell had gone hungry or thirsty since the time the Australian woman was thrown in when she was half dead. Therefore, she is amazed at their ability to survive without those important necessities of human existence. And it shall wonder if this woman had been put into that dark, bottomless pit to die of hunger and thirst. Her suspicions are confirmed by the faces stricken with hunger and thirst for each other. But she would rather die of starvation than eat or drink in such a filthy place, dirtier than any public toilet in the densely populated city of Kandahar. Another strange phenomenon of the place of Berdishan was noticed by the white foreign detainee concerning the new arrivals. Ever since she awoke from her painful sleep, she had now and then seen at least 2 or 3 new arrivals dragged half dead by the policewoman and dumped into the blaze of agony and torment. So when the sun went down that day, the dark room was so full that there was no place left for the newcomers to sit on. The Australian woman worries about what will happen if this boredom continues for another 24 hours. She was forced to her feet a long time ago because there was nowhere left to sit. Some of the new arrivals were severely beaten on the faces by female Afghani police officers and had their clothes torn off. Some of them were unable to walk on their feet, so they were dragged like tree trunks by the policewoman and thrown into the abyss. Some have open wounds and profuse bleeding. Some are dying, some are dead and gone forever. The white woman was shocked to see such seriously injured female detainees not being sent to the hospital, but instead being thrown into the overcrowded women's lockup. Even her body is full of cuts and bruises from her deadly fight with her rabies and the brutal beatings of those who wanted to stone her to death. At 7 p.m., the Australian detainee saw 4 policewomen standing in front of the door of the dark room. One of them produced a large key and opened the door to the bottomless pit. Then she saw 4 large female policewomen making their way. By that time, the darkened room was filled to the limit. To allow the huge policewoman to enter, the inhabitants of the Black Chasm had to band together. These detainees, like the white Australian woman who happened to be near the wall, were crushed against the concrete wall. The widowed woman child is breathing heavily. Her feet were lifted off the ground against her will. One of the 4 policewomen holds a list of names in her hand. She started reading aloud the names from her list. Every name call was asked to come out. The white foreign woman wished her name would be on the list, for she saw that whatever they would take them or whatever they would do to them, it would be less cruel than spending another night in such a filthy place. The policewoman kept reading her list until she came to Irshad's name. Yes, ma'am, shouted the Australian detainee Irshad Shambari. Come here, another policewoman shouted. Irshad made her way with great difficulty. While she was leaving, she heard another policewoman shouting at her, saying, Wait a minute. Irshad stopped and turned her face slowly toward the four policewomen. When she stood in front of them and took a closer look at their faces and bodies, she saw they were men in women's clothing. Irshad has never seen women like those who look like men. The four giant women have big faces, big noses, big ears, big mouths, big lips, big hands, big legs, big heads, big breasts, and incredibly massive bodies. If it weren't for their watermelon breasts, the Australian woman might have mistaken them for policemen. Are you the white foreigner who was arrested in the village of Sharaf al Banat? Asked the biggest policewoman. Irshad replied, Yes, I am, ma'am. So you are the white foreign woman who stabbed the village chief. Irshad was silent. Tonight I am going to make you kiss my feet without your clothes on, you dirty foreign street bitch. I'm not a prostitute. Please, ma'am, do not insult me with these inappropriate names. The policeman shouted, Get out, you bloody murderer. Then the female officer grabbed Irshad's hand and took her out of the dark room. Then she shoved her into a police wagon. She sat near her. The deeply frightened foreign white woman knew that the angry Afghani policewoman meant evil to her, and this realization frightened her to death. So she started trembling with fear, horror, and panic. When Ishad got on the police wagon, she found that it was already crowded with the occupants brought from the dark room, which is like a bottomless pit. Richard was forced to squeeze her body between two fat policewomen. The carriage left as soon as the white foreign detainee entered. It emerged from the police station into the crowded streets of Kandahar city. The white woman has never been arrested before in Afghanistan and therefore had no idea where they will take her and what they will do to her except that the four big policewomen harbor evil for them. The circumstance in which the detained Australian white mother, Irshad, found herself did not allow her to think much about her 7 children. Meanwhile, the village chief, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad, was kept in the intensive care unit for 3 days before he was moved from critical condition to stable condition. A week later, he was discharged from the hospital. Instead of being arrested for attempting to rape the foreign white woman, he was allowed to go free and return to Sharaf al Banat village as the great hero. He was received in his village with celebration and women singing with tambourines. The village elders slaughter many cows and sheep, and the woman prepare a big feast as a sign of dignity or karama with delicious Afghani dishes. Then all the inhabitants of the village were invited to free meals. So the notorious polygamist, rapist, and womanizer was treated like a triumphant hero returning from a deadly war against an infidel Christian woman, while his rape victim was sentenced to be stoned to death by the elders and thrown behind bars by the police for defending herself against her rapist. The Australian widow Irshad Shamari was imprisoned for 6 months in the most dangerous and filthy prison in Afghanistan. It is a maximum security prison called Kandahar Central Prison for Rebellious Muslim Women. In fact, It is not even a prison, it is a heavily secure area where the worst female criminals are imprisoned and hanged, beheaded, or stoned to death for adultery, prostitution, and murder. It did not have rooms or a cell. It also has no dormitories. The female prisoners do not have a roof over their heads and therefore must somehow protect themselves from the scorching sun in the summer and the rain during the fall. They use their own clothing to protect their heads from the intense heat during the day and their bodies from the freezing cold at night. Besides, they must protect themselves from scorpions and snakes. Flies, mosquitoes, and lizards are the least of the many problems they have to face every day and every night. All these hardships are nothing compared to the imprisoned human beasts that the alien white woman has to fight to survive in the prison. If the prisoner could not fight for her food, she would starve to death. The law of nature, survival of the fittest, and the principle of Islamic jihad warfare, might is right and there is no difference between evil and good, are the only sayings that apply to life in Kandahar Central Women's Prison. The Australian widow Irshad Shammari somehow managed to survive in that hellish prison for 6 months until she was tried and convicted of her alleged crime of disobeying her legitimate Muslim husband, the leader of Sharaf al Banat village, Al Sheikh Al Humam Muhammad Ahmed, and attempting to kill him on their first wedding night. Therefore, the Sharia court in Kandahar city found her guilty of attempting to kill her husband, Al Sheikh Al Jalil Muhammad Ahmed, the head of the so-called peaceful village of Sharaf al-Banat, or the girl's honor. The court that tried her did not allow her to appoint a lawyer because it was a Sharia court. The accused foreign white woman, Irshad Shammari, tried to prove to the Islamic court judge that she had never married the village leader, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed. However, the panel of the Sharia court claimed that it had unauthorized legal marriage certificate proving that a halal Islamic marriage had taken place between her and her victim. Then the victim of the attempted rape told the court that the marriage certificate was forged and an act of fabrication by the village chief's relatives to acquit him of the crime of rape. Despite this, the Sharia court rejected her statement and sentenced her to 12 months in prison. Her single testimony was rejected because the Sharia considered the witness of one woman is inadmissible in court of law because as a woman her testimony is equal half of a man's testimony. She needed another woman to be witness with her to make her testimony acceptable as one testimony of a man. Accordingly, as a man, her alleged husband's testimony was accepted, and hers was rejected as a woman deficient in religion and intellect. And because the convicted foreign Australian widow Irshad Shammari had spent 6 months in pre-trial detention, her sentence was reduced to a half year. In addition to a year's imprisonment, the Sharia court ordered the convicted white woman to be flogged with 53 lashes for exposing her nakedness in front of the villagers. When the beautiful, sexy, blonde, white Australian woman is released from prison after 1 year, she goes half insane and loses half her weight. Most of the beauty of her face was gone, and the charm of her sexy body also disappeared. During those 12 months, she lived in conditions that were not suitable for wild animals to survive. 75% of convicted female inmates die before half of their prison term ends. The white foreign prisoner Irshad often starved whenever Her food was looted by other violent female prisoners or a Muslim terrorist among women. She was beaten every now and then by her fellow prisoners and female guards. Because she was the only white foreign woman in the prison, she became a victim of constant persecution and harassment by the local women inmates. At times, she was accused of being a spy for the West, and thus she was seriously beaten by fanatical Taliban Muslim women and Al Qaeda female terrorists. She was called by very insulting names such as the infidel Christian, the unclean foreign woman, the uncircumcised woman, the white witch, the dirty bitch, the street prostitute, the unpurified adulteress, and the like of other obscene abuses that are often used against Westerners in the Muslim world. During her long imprisonment, the Australian woman Rashada Shamari could not sleep at night because of the millions of mosquitoes. She was always getting sick because of the billions of flies in the day and the filthy blood she shared with thousands of uneducated, unhygienic, and unhealthy Muslim women. It is a great divine miracle that the white Australian prisoner Irshad Shamari was able to live and survive in that death concentration prison until she was released and became a free woman again. Chapter 20: The Guardian of Children Who Has Become a Wolf. During her imprisonment, the Australian mother, Irshad Shammari, was thinking day and night about her 7 children. She never expected that she would be away from them for more than a few days or 2 weeks. She deliberately lied to Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, whom she left her 7 children with him as their guardian, by telling him that she would go to her country, Australia, permanently. But in her heart, she was planning to go to Pakistan and seek help from the Australian embassy in Islamabad city and return to pick up her children. She thought her embassy would accept her application and issue Australian passports, foreign visas, and free airline tickets for her and her 7 children. When her embassy rejected her request, the Australian widow decided to return to those detention camps in Afghanistan and marry Mullah Abu Muhammad Abu Hamid. She decided to marry an old geezer of her grandfather's age in order to live with her children. Unfortunately, troubles with 2 of her captors at the Holy Mountain Shrine and an evil Surba in the village Sharaf al Banat altered the course of who became a humanoid wolf and began devouring them. Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, like any other religious leader, does not spend a single night in the tents of those infernal camps. He lives in his big house in the city of Kandahar that looks like a palace. He comes every morning to the camps of the Mujahideen on the outskirts of Kandahar city. He spends his day teaching and training the 100 Mujahideen entrusted to him, and late in the evening he drives back to his house in Medina in his private car. He has his own chauffeur. His house is like a big mansion with many rooms. All his Afghani wives and their children and grandchildren live with him in his mansion. When his child left her children with him, he made her 3 daughters as unpaid maidservants to his wives and married her eldest daughter Aisha, who was 10 years old. Concerning her 3 sons, he sends 2 of them every morning to the main market in downtown Kandahar city and forces them to work and sometimes beg for food. He did not send them food or give them money to buy their three meals, but to work from sunrise to sunset and buy their own food out of pocket. If the two sons find no one to employ them, they must either starve or beg the people to give them alms or crumbs from their leftovers. Sometimes, when they cannot get work or money through begging, the two children are driven to steal in order to quench their pangs of hunger. They were arrested several times and flogged by the Islamic police in the main market. This is what the evil mullah did to the Australian white woman's seven children while she was imprisoned in Kandahar Central Women's Prison. Upon her release, the Australian mother was escorted by three female prison guards in a police wagon to downtown Kandahar and left her there. From there, she has to walk for a few hours to reach the Mujahideen camps. It was midday when Irshad got out of the police and cage. Mother Irshad counted the time minute by minute, her step as fast as her heart beat. She wants to grow wings, fly through the air, land in the Mujahideen camps, and meet and cuddle her seven children. She misses them so much and knows her children will miss her too. Although it was not her fault, Irshad still feels guilty and holds herself responsible for the long separation between them and their mother. In her heart, she still trusts the, the Honorable Sheikh Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. She believes he is taking the trouble to take care of the seven children who are not his offspring. She decided to thank him very much and apologize for her unexpected delay. For the welfare and upbringing of her seven young children, the Australian widow decided to marry the Honorable Old Giza, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. She considered him the caretaker and faithful guardian of her seven children, so she does not want to separate her children from the man who has become their adoptive father and spiritual guardian and will soon be husband to their beloved mother who loves them more than loves herself. Anyway, the freed white female prisoner, the Australian widow Shada Shammer, arrived at the Mujahideen camps in the late afternoon. She was waiting terribly and feeling as if she walked through the valley of shadow of death to reach those concentration death camps where she was imprisoned for 5 years with her late Saudi husband and their seven children. The Australian white mother did not see any major changes that occurred in her long absence from the death camps. Everything is the same and everyone is the same, with the same dirty environment, the same miserable people. Every male terrorist is fully armed, even if he is a child, and every female is exploited as a sex slave and abuse even female children. The only noticeable change she finds is that her old tent, which she used to live in with her seven children as dolls in a toy box, is now occupied by another Muslim family. When she inquired about her three sons and four daughters, she was told that they live in the city with their guardian, the virtuous Imam Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. Then the foreign white widow looked for the mullah until she found him in the training ground. As soon as the mullah Abu Hamid saw her, his bearded face revealed that he was annoyed to see the white woman again. Irshad Shammari once standing in front of his desk in his office. Then the Australian foreign lady respectfully greeted him by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh and apologized for the delay, which was caused by unforeseen circumstances and beyond her control. She decided not to tell anyone about her suffering in the village of Sharaf al Banat and her imprisonment in Gandahar city. At first, the evil mullah tried to convince the white foreign mother to forget her 7 children and go to her native country, Australia. Ershad strongly rejected this advice and demanded custody of her 7 children. She told him that she would rather die than leave her children and travel home alone. Then Mullah Abu Hamid accused her of neglect and told her that she had deserted her 7 children, threw them in his arms, and fled to her country, Australia, to find a white dick of an uncircumcised Christian infidel man to have sex with her uncircumcised hairy pussy. He claimed that she was a racist white woman, so she refused to marry him because he was an Afghani man who has a circumcised cock like the circumcised dick of the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, about whom his beloved child bride Aisha said that he could control his phallus. When the mullah accused her of racism, abandonment, desertion of her 7 children, and escaping to her motherland for selfish and lustful motives, the Australian woman was forced to reveal her problems in the cursed village Sharaf al Banat with its notorious womanizer chief and her imprisonment in the infernal Kandahar women's prison. Then the dirty pedophile old man who loves to have sex with female children reminded the white mother Irshad of the letter of her late Saudi husband, the gallant Mata Mustafa, in which he wrote that if his Australian widow wanted to live in the Mujahideen camps, she should marry a devout Muslim man. Her late husband had nominated him to be the guardian of his 7 Muslim children and a husband to his white wife. But in no uncertain terms, she should not be allowed to remove his 7 Muslim children from the Mujahideen camps and take them to live among the Christian infidels in Australia. Therefore, the mullah told her that she could not be allowed to have custody of her children back and remain in the camps unless she agreed to marry a devout kicker of the Mujahideen. The evil leader predicted that the racist white foreign woman would not agree to marry any Afghani Taliban terrorist, even if he was the last man in the world. Therefore, he wanted to dissuade her and make her flee again and return to her western homeland. Despite this, the Australian mother refused to follow the words of Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid and demanded custody of her children. When the evil man refused to retain the 7 children to her as their mother, Irshad sought the intervention and assistance of another Mullah Amir leader who is higher in rank than Imam Muhammad Abu Hamid. Through this second high terrorist prince, the Australian mother learned that her first daughter, Aisha Mustafa Shammari, had married her guardian Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid a year ago. With regard to her 6 other Muslim children, the elder mullah decided that the white foreign mother could regain custody of her children because Islam forbids adopting them through the prince Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. He then advised that the widow Irshad try to find a devout Muslim man and marry him. The heartbreaking and unbelievable news of her daughter being kidnapped and raped by her caretaker has turned the Australian mother into a madwoman. She became so angry that she became determined to kill the kidnapper and abuser of her innocent child, Aisha. Her righteous anger against the rapists of her minor daughter, the devil Muhammad Abu Hamid, promoted her to attack him in front of the Grand Prince and the other Mujahideen. Her anger doubled when she learned that he had married her 10-year-old daughter when she was when he was 70 years old geezer. She grabbed his long beard and started hitting and kicking him with all her might. She described him as a kidnapper, rapist, and child molester. When the other mujahideen got over the shock, they detained the angry white mother and forcibly separated her from the old mullah Abu Iblis Hamid. Despite this, the angry white woman continued to fight back, calling the abuser of her child names and accusing him of not being a good Muslim. She also accused the other senior mullah of being a bad religious leader because he ruled that she could not have her underage daughter Aisha because she had already become a legitimate Muslim wife to her Muslim husband Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, and he tasted her honey and she tasted his sweetness. Then the brave foreign mother Irshad threatened to kill the senior mullah and the despicable Mullah Abu Hamid if they did not allow her to retain her minor daughter to her custody. To control her, the big mullah ordered some men to fetch ropes and tie up the mad, angry white woman who was behaving as a white witch and dirty bitch. They describe her as having become an apostate Muslim woman and reverting to being an unclean infidel Christian lady as she was before she married her Muslim husband, the martyr hero Mustafa Shammari. They claim that she was converted to Christianity again during her return to the land of infidels, Australia. They accuse her of apostasy because she refused to accept God's kismet and division of her Muslim daughter Aisha, who was married in a permissible Islamic halal marriage with the Honorable Mullah Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hamid. May God bless him. As a result, the outrageous Australian woman was restrained with strong ropes as if she had become a dangerous mad woman. They tied her hands and feet just like a lunatic woman. Then four terrorists carried her bound body and threw her in a tent, and two armed mujahideen guarded her around the clock. Mullah Abu Hamid carried out the orders of the senior mullah and brought back the children of the white mother who was imprisoned in her tent the next day. Irshad is still bound in the ropes when one of the terrorists brings her children. When she saw her six children, the Australian mother could not believe her eyes that the children standing before her were her offspring, whom she left a year ago with Mullah Abu Hamid as their guardian. Their bodies were emaciated, and their miserable faces revealed that they had been starved, beaten, and abused for many months. They are in dirty rags. Some of them are barefoot. The heartbroken, loving mother, Shad, started crying when she saw the miserable condition of her six children. Then she called them and asked them to embrace her. When they approached her, she smelled their stench as if they had been brought to her from the outside the filthy sewers. The grieving mother is sad, wept like a child, and begged her six children to forgive her for leaving them with the evil mullah and traveling to Pakistan. She could not tell them what happened to her while she was away. The miserable conditions of her remaining children promoted the imprisoned mother Irshad to concede and compromise with the senior mullah and to postpone her revenge on the evil mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. The Australian foreign woman also fears that the two wicked Afghani mullahs will fabricate the crime of apostasy from Islam, which they accuse her of, and of converting to Christianity and returning to the religion of her Australian Christian family. In this case, she will be killed as an apostate Muslim woman who has become an who has become an impure Christian infidel. She will be beheaded with a double-edged sword, and her three innocent sons will be left orphans, begging for food in the streets of Kandahar city. Her three remaining daughters will be married to illiterate mujahideen from the Taliban group or Al Qaeda fighters and give birth to terrorists. Her three sons may also become terrorists and blow up their bodies in jihad for the sake of God, as their terrorist father Mustafa did against innocent Americans in New York. Accordingly, the foreign mother begged the senior Grand Amir to forgive her and release her and allow her to take care of her six children as a Muslim mother who wants to raise them in the city of Kandahar among the righteous Mujahideen families who are the only true followers of Islam in the entire world. Mullah al-Sheikh al-Kabir accepted her apology and allowed her to live in the camps as a single mother without forcing her to marry another Muslim man, unless she wanted to do so of her own accord. However, under no circumstances she is the Australian mother allowed to take her Muslim children out of the Mujahideen camps, even if they are sick or are dying of starvation. Despite this, the anger of the white Australian foreign mother Irshad against the kidnap and rapist of her minor daughter Aisha did not leave her heart for even a second. She cries day and night and always prays to God to free her underage daughter from the sexual exploitation of the pedophile old man who loves to have sex with minor girls. Meanwhile, the so-called legal Afghani Muslim husband of her kidnapped child Aisha refused to allow the Australian mother to see or visit her minor daughter who lives with him and his three Afghani Muslim women and their sons and daughters in his large palace in a luxurious neighborhood in downtown Kandahar city. Although the evil Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid refused to allow her to see or visit her daughter Aisha, yet the compassionate Australian mother who had been terribly abused in the Muslim world continued to believe that one day the loving God of heaven would perform a miracle and release her and her six remaining children from the Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan and send them to Australia, where she was born and raised by loving and anointed Christian parents. But as the days and months passed, the white foreign widow mother or child, Shambari, lost hope in such a divine intervention.